All right. Hello, students. This is the lesson for NE5, the notes on NE5 about the governor of Nebraska. So if you are following along and taking notes, you will want to have this sheet out, the NE5 and 6 note sheet. And again, a lot of the same information can be found in the NE5 and 6 executive branch brochure, which I have, of course, posted to Canvas. And you can find that here as well. So lots of different places you can get the information, but I'm going to try to walk you through some of the more important things. So first up is a little bit about our governor, and of course the name of the Nebraska governor is Pete Ricketts, and he has his own website here. If you go to governor.nebraska.gov, you'll come to this website, and it's all about Pete Ricketts. And I clicked over here on the About tab, and you can find out about him, excuse me. And it talks about here how he was sworn in 2015, which means he got elected in 2014. He's worked through various jobs in Nebraska. Born in Nebraska City, raised in Omaha, but most of his life he spent around Chicago because he went to the University of Chicago, and then he got a job working for Ameritrade. So Ameritrade's a big stockbroking company. They do a lot of online stocks and things. So made a lot of money. He comes from a very wealthy family. His family is very connected politically, so he cites Ameritrade as kind of his big achievement as far as his career goes. He is married to Suzanne, and they have 3 children. I believe Roscoe and Margot apparently are twins, and Eleanor is the other daughter younger than the younger daughter. So those are a few of the facts. I want to get back to the PowerPoint here. But the other fun fact that you may not have known is that his family owns the Chicago Cubs. So the Ricketts family in general, that's one thing that they have in common. So if you're a Cubs fan, you also may be a fan of Pete Ricketts. He, of course, is a Republican, as are nearly all of the leaders of Nebraska's legislature and executive branch. So the requirements to be governor of Nebraska, other than be a Republican in most cases, is to be at least 30 years old, to be a United States citizen, and then they must be a resident of Nebraska or have residence in Nebraska for at least 5 years. So if you've been following along throughout the year with a lot of the jobs, the official government jobs, to be president, to be senator, to be congressman, usually they have an age, a citizenship, and a residency. And this governor of Nebraska is no different. Age of 30, be a U.S. citizen and a resident of Nebraska. So as a review, since we've learned a lot about all of these positions now, I'm going to give you just a moment here, and I want you to kind of connect the job title to the minimum age required. So on the left, there are 5 jobs from the House of Representatives, Nebraska State Senate, President, Senator, or Governor. And on the right are 4 minimum ages, 21, 25, 30, and 35. And if you could draw a line connecting how old do you have to be in the U.S. House of Representatives? I want you to think for a second. How old do you have to be in the Nebraska State Senate? This is to work in the unicameral. How old do you have to be U.S. President? It's one of these over here. How old do you have to be a U.S. Senator? This is like to work in the U.S. Capitol in Washington. And how old do you have to be a Nebraska governor? So as kind of a little review, I wanted to see if you could match those up. There are the correct answers. The youngest required job is to be a state senator in Nebraska. That's only 21. U.S. House, 25. Senator for the United States as well as governor are both 30 years old as a requirement. And then, of course, the oldest is president. And if you think about that, that probably makes sense. That's the most prestigious job. That's probably why it has something to do with the age of being 35. So governor, this lesson's all about the governor, is 30, the same age as a U.S. senator. All right. There are various duties of the Nebraska governor. And I'm going to come back to this in a second because, again, if you want to find out more about what someone does in today's world, go to their website and you can find out about what he does. But if you just go to the homepage and see what's important, there are various things that the governor does. He's talking on current events now about an incident at the prisons, wins the Governor's Cup for economic development, celebrating Nebraska's statehood. He gave the State of the State address recently. He's talking about the National Guard. We'll learn about that. So again, you can guess a lot about what he does just by going to their website. So I would always recommend, again, if you're trying to find out about somebody, go to their website. And we're going to bounce back and forth between these things as we go. Let me get back to my slideshow here. All right, so the first thing he does is he informs the unicameral of important issues. And actually, let me back up and say, of the 9 things that I'm going to show you on here, many of them are the same as the United States president. So I want you to be comparing these 2 executives, the U.S. president, the jobs of the United States president, or the various hats, if you remember that lesson of the presidency, to the various duties of the governor. So the first thing is inform the unicameral of important issues. He has to, by law, tell the legislative branch things that are going on in our state. So he does that by giving the State of the State address and various other addresses here. But one of the things that came up here was the State of the State address. I'm going to scroll through. And you can actually watch his State of the State address if you find it on his, there it is, watch the governor's State of the State address. So if we wanted to, you could click on here and you could watch, just like the State of the Union, the governor gives the full speech telling about, there it is right there, where he, looks like it's about 30 minutes long. We're not going to watch it all here, but you could click on this, find it yourself, and you can see how the governor has to notify the legislature from time to time. Right now, he's notifying them with the spinning circle that isn't getting me where I want, but that's all right. You can find it on your own time if you're really interested, but you know where it is. All right, so one thing he does is he informs the unicameral. The second thing is he has to propose the state's budget, just like the president does. The difference between the Nebraska governor, however, and the president is major in the budget, in that the Nebraska budget must be balanced. What I mean by balanced is you have the expenditures of what we spend on programs. How much money is going out has to equal the amount of money coming in taxes. Okay, so whatever the projected amount of tax money that's coming into the state, that's the amount of money that the governor has to spend on various issues. Now, the governor isn't the final word on this, but he proposes where he'd like to see money spent and what taxes he'd like to see coming in, and it's up to the legislature, the unicameral in Nebraska, to actually get that done. But the big difference between the president and the state governor is that the governor must have a balanced budget. Nebraska cannot borrow money, or at least we choose not to borrow money. So our budget, what is going out in payments, must be what is equal to what's supposed to come in taxes. And it doesn't always work that way. Right now, we're in the middle of what they call a budget shortfall. We projected to get so many $1 million in, and we didn't quite get that, like taxes or businesses didn't do that well, so they didn't pay as much in taxes, or sales taxes were down or whatever. And we're not making the amount of money that our state proposed or projected. So now they have to figure out where they're going to cut so that they can save enough money to make the budget balance. So the job of the governor is also to appoint people to various jobs. I put a picture of the Nebraska Supreme Court on there. Just like the president of the United States appoints federal Supreme Court judges, the governor of Nebraska appoints people to the state Supreme Court and also to various other jobs. And I'm going to scroll ahead to the governor's website once again. And we're going to go back to his cabinet. Because just like the president, he has his own cabinet. I'll just go through them very quickly. He has advisors, and he appoints all these people: agriculture, banking, corrections, crime commission, energy, the state fire marshal. There's just various people that the governor appoints. And there's even a place, if you look through here it is. I found where if you're interested in one of these jobs, there are various boards on the left. He appoints people to various boards and commissions. And these are all jobs that are currently available. The Foster Care Advisory Committee, they're looking for a public member. The Nebraska State Fair Board, they're looking for somebody in District 1. I don't know District 1 for the fair where that is, but if you lived in District 1, you could apply, and you can actually apply to get appointed. And that's kind of what he's talking about here. Thank you for applying to serve on Nebraska's many boards. And then you would apply, fill out the paperwork here, and then the governor would appoint you officially once you passed all the, the checks that you needed for these jobs. So there are various jobs that are up for appointment. So just like the president has to appoint a lot of different people, the governor has to appoint various people as well. The next job of the governor, or the duty of the governor, is he signs and vetoes bills. Again, just like the president does. We've kind of already talked about this. The differences would be the president has 10 days. The governor only has 5 days to decide. The governor also can what's called line item veto. As a review, line item veto is the governor can strike out parts of a bill that he doesn't like and leave the rest of the bill intact. So it usually has something to do with finances. Like maybe the governor agrees with giving this much money to this group, but not this much money to the other group. So he'll veto, or what's called line item veto, just that portion. So it gives him a little more flexibility on a veto. The governor is the commander-in-chief of the Nebraska National Guard, just like the president's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces for the United States. The governor can call out the Nebraska National Guard. Maybe if there were like a tornado that ripped through a town, the Nebraska National Guard would come in and make sure people weren't stealing or looting, or providing blankets or whatever for the victims. So and various other reasons as well. But the Nebraska National Guard is somewhat under the direction of the governor. He has to enforce Nebraska's laws. Again, the whole point of being an executive is you carry out the law. So like the president has to carry out the federal or national laws with like immigration and whatnot, the Nebraska governor has to make sure that Nebraska's laws are being enforced. And he, again, doesn't go around himself, as a police officer, but his departments, various departments, make sure that things are carried out. The Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, which is under the governor, has to make sure that all of Nebraska's child welfare, for example, laws are being carried out. He makes sure the police departments are doing their job and enforcing laws as they're supposed to. So that's one of his jobs. He's allowed to pardon criminals. The governor, just like the president, is allowed to pardon criminals. The difference is the governor pardons you for state crimes. So if you commit murder, which is actually a state crime, and you want to get your sentence pardoned, you ask the governor for that. Since Nebraska has the death penalty, death row inmates will often try to get at least some sort of a reprieve or pardon from the governor where they won't. Maybe or a commutation actually would be called, where he could lessen their sentence. So the governor serves on what's called the State Pardons Board, and they all work together. He's one of the members of that is able to pardon criminals. I may have already told you about the Mississippi governor who pardoned a whole bunch of ex-murderers and let maybe 20 or so of them go, and it was kind of a public outrage right on his last day in office. Not quite as controversial in Nebraska, but the Nebraska governor has that power as well. So I guess if you were ever found yourself in a state prison for committing a state crime, you could request a pardon from the governor's office. The Nebraska governor, just like the president, can call a special session of the Nebraska legislature. In this case, the unicameral. Various times that's happened. A few years ago, Governor Heineman at the time called the legislature in November. Remember, they get out of office in about June or even May in some years. And the governor called them into a special session to discuss the Keystone XL pipeline route because it had been approved at various levels, but they didn't want it to go across the sandhills. So the governor called them in to see if they wanted to approve that route or not. And then lastly, the governor serves on various boards and commissions. I already mentioned the State Pardons Board. Did I let this one on here? Not sure if yep, there you go. The boards and commissions. that he serves on. They would list some of those in here. They mentioned the state. Oops, that's some of the other stuff again. I'm sorry, but they mentioned some of the like state pardons board again, and various other agencies that the governor has to appoint. I'm not sure where I found that at. Sorry about that, but he does. Trust me, he serves on various other boards and commissions. Did I leave that in here? Well, all right. So those are 9 of the various boards, various jobs, of the governor. I'm going to move right along then on your worksheet to the next question, which are the 9 duties, which we just did. So then we've got just these last 3 to go, the number of terms, the salary, and then some of the past governors. So the terms of the Nebraska governor are pretty consistent with what you've learned about with the U.S. president. In fact, it's exactly the same. He serves a 4-year term and can only serve 2 consecutive terms. I do not know off the top of my head if a governor could come back after he has served his 2 consecutive terms if he sat out 4 years. It has never happened. And pretty much exclusively, Nebraska has always required a 4-year term with term limits. The early Nebraska governor's very, very first state governor, I think, only served a 2-year term, but otherwise they've all been able to serve a 4-year term. Kind of an interesting fact, just like the president, if the vice president in the Nebraska government, that is the lieutenant governor, that is like the vice governor. If he replaces the governor, and that's happened on numerous occasions, he can only serve a total of 10 years. If you remember back when we learned about the president, that's the same way. The vice president can only serve a maximum of 10 years. And actually, Dave Heineman, our most recent governor before Ricketts, he actually served the full 10 years. He took over when Mike Johans went off to be the President Bush's Secretary of Agriculture. He left Nebraska to go be the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, and Dave Heineman stepped up as lieutenant governor and then went on to get elected twice. So he served the full 10 years. In fact, many of you, that was a good chunk of your life probably, was under Dave Heineman. Compensation for the governor is $105,000 per year. That's gone steadily up since the very first Nebraska governor got $1,000 a year, and now it's up to $105,000. He also gets a few other perks, including living in this mansion, which is just south. It's just south, I believe, across the street from the state capitol building. If you've spent time in Lincoln, and they just renovated it not too many years ago, so it's I think pretty nice inside. You can get tours and stuff on that. So that is the end of that. The only other thing I wanted to show you is a little bit about the past governors. So again, if you've already looked through this brochure, you have already seen this. And I asked you how many of Nebraska's governors of the past have ever have their names after counties in Nebraska. So if you have a Nebraska map, that would help you as well. But there are some famous people that have been governors of Nebraska. Just to point out a few things, J. Sterling Morton may sound familiar to you. I believe that is the Arbor Day founder. If you know that Nebraska started Arbor Day, that's kind of important. But we do not have a Morton County. There is a Sterling town in Nebraska, but not a Morton County. We've only had one woman governor in Nebraska. That was when I was young, Kay Orr. Here she is down here. There's some other people you may have heard of. Bob Carey, he was a senator for a while. Jim Exon went on. James Exon, he went by Jim. He went on to be was governor and then went on to be a senator. Ben Nelson, many of you probably have heard of him before. And then Mike Johans, more recently, was a senator. After he was governor, he went to be Secretary of Agriculture and then on to senator. Dave Heineman, and then, of course, Pete Ricketts here at the bottom. So of these old school governors, how many of them have counties named after them? Well, I'll help you out a little bit on that. Algernon S. Paddock, not a county, but a great name. Just wanted to point that out. Algernon. Izard is also a fun name, but is not a county. But a lot of these earlier governors were, if you think about it, when the state is becoming a territory and then a state, or when Nebraska was becoming a territory and then a state, you're going to name counties after famous people. For example, there's a Lincoln County in Nebraska named after Abraham Lincoln. Well, in this case, we've got our very first governor, Francis Burt, and there's a Burt County up in Nebraska. There is a Richardson County, our fourth governor here. Oops, I skipped one. There's a Cumming County in Nebraska, so there's 3 of them. There's a Saunders County in Nebraska. That's where Wahoo is, if you know where Wahoo is. So there's 4. David Butler was our first state governor, Butler, and there's a Butler County. That's where David City is. That's actually where I was born, in Butler County. So there's 5. Furnace County, that's 6. There's a Furnace County in I believe south central Nebraska. Nance County, that's not very far from here. That is like Fullerton. Yeah, it is Fullerton, not like Fullerton. It is Fullerton, not just our neighbor over there. There's a Dawes County. There's a Thayer County, also in South Nebraska. There's a Boyd County, clear up in the very northern part of Nebraska. So I think that is the extensive list of all of the counties. And if you would think about it, probably most of the counties have already been settled by the 1890s. We're getting close to 1900 here, so or shortly after that. So probably these first ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Furnace 5. Butler is 6. 7, 8, 9, and 10. If I counted correctly, I would see 10 Nebraska governors who ended up having counties named after them. So, all right, I hope you enjoyed this little trip through the history books of Nebraska and a little bit more about the role of governor in Nebraska.